G'day viewers, I'll start this vagina video every day in January if nothing arises with a bit of a news flash. It's 10 p.m. and it's still over 30 Celsius here, so there is no way I'm going out to my shed slash studio and switching on the hot lights and dying. So I'm doing this in my kitchen with just basic lights, and so the chroma key probably won't even work, so it might be a plain green screen behind me when I do the editing. I won't find out how well it works till I try and edit it. Anyway, that's a bit of a preamble. The other important fact that goes with that is because I'm in my house, I'm not going to be shouting or swearing because I don't want to disrupt the rest of my house. So I'm just going to have a bit of a conversation with you tonight, but this is something I wanted to have a talk about for a while because I think it's a fascinating topic, and it's Pokemon Go and what we can learn from it. Now, you bring up Pokemon Go at the moment and you'll get people sort of doing a chuckle, hearty chuckle. You mean Pokemon went, right? It's gone. Well, and this is the thing. While it's true that use of Pokemon Go has declined at least 95%, it's still, depending on what day you look, the number 2 or 3 grossing app in the App Store. So even with that massive drop-off, they're still making more money than virtually anyone out of mobile apps. So you can imagine how much money they were making at their peak. Oh look, one of my lights is being stupid, so I'm just going to switch it off. Wait a sec. Stupid thing, it wasn't charged. I'm a ghost. I'm a ghost. Look at me. I'm a ghost. Where's the off switch for this stupid thing? Anywho, that probably answers my question about whether or not I'm going to green screen this, because I will have screwed up the lighting completely now. Now you can't see my eyes. If you think it's important to see someone's eyes, this will probably freak you out. Anyway, I'll continue. Pokemon Go. Still making a lot of money, and they're clearly about to release the next generation of Pokemon, which will get a lot of people playing it again, and they'll start making tens of millions of dollars a week, if not hundreds of millions, as opposed to the just millions they're making at the moment. Because at their peak, they're undoubtedly making a freakish amount of money. But that's one of the key things, I think, to take away from Pokemon Go. If you work in IT particularly, or if you've ever tried to do a crowd-funded project, it's important to understand you can succeed to a degree that hurts you. You can succeed so much it hurts you really badly. For anyone, sorry, I'm going to have another drink. It's Saturday. I have had a couple of drinks. So, whiskey sour. I could have edited out the burp, but we're friends. This is all natural. You don't need to pretend I never burp or fart or anything like that. So, yeah, I started playing Pokemon early on, and of course it didn't work for weeks and weeks. It was spotty to not working at all, which was incredibly frustrating. Even here in Australia, which was one of the first markets where it was released, it just didn't work for ages. And it was, if you know IT at all, the fairly obvious reason was that they didn't have the infrastructure to support the massive number of users. They succeeded beyond their expectations, and if you've ever worked on a big project, you know that saying to the dudes who control the money before you go live, say, hey, before we even go live, you should spend a couple of $100 million on servers and infrastructure because we're convinced we'll be super successful. And they'll go, what are you basing that on? Oh, we just think so. Is there any precedent for this? No. And there was literally no precedent for the success of Pokemon Go. So they're like, the idea that you could have had a successful infrastructure in place before it went live flies in the face of the reality of trying to convince the money guys to give you $100 million up front. And once it was super successful and they were so overwhelmed, they would have spent weeks screaming at the money guys of how many tens of millions of dollars worth of servers they needed, like now, right now, get them online now. And the people who were being really shitty to the makers of the game, they were either just jerks or they were just willfully overlooking how difficult difficult it is to get that amount of infrastructure and that amount of money happening. So that's one thing Pokemon Go revealed. You can succeed to an extreme degree that can actually hurt you. Interestingly, a YouTube friend of mine, an Aussie, has a tech vlog called EEV blog. He ran a really successful Kickstarter for a physical product, and it succeeded way beyond the scale he expected, and he had a lot of difficulties actually delivering on it. He did successfully deliver on it, unlike some Kickstarters that failed to deliver completely. But it is a case where you think, oh, how can you succeed too much? You really can. If you haven't prepared to succeed out of scale, it can really hurt you if that is what happens. The second bit I already hinted at. One of the more fascinating things about the Pokemon Go phenomenon to me is that it really highlighted what assholes people are. People generally are really bad. Like the really ridiculously vicious way a lot of users of the game reacted to the makers. Now, there's a million shortcomings to the game you could point out, particularly when it launched. But, you know, the whole let's launch straight into death threats and abuse, who does that? What does that serve? What works out of that? I really have trouble with people whose default reaction to a situation they don't like is to make threats. It doesn't make sense at all until you take into account how fucked people are generally. And a slight corollary of that, it did show, and this was astonishing, you can completely change the behavior of a large section of the population overnight if you give them the right motivation. I'm sure you saw the videos of crowds of hundreds, if not thousands of people thronging in various parks around the world, blocking traffic, previously quiet neighborhoods getting overrun because a park in their neighborhood had rare Pokemon in it. People being jerks and just swarming way into the night, like into the early hours of the morning, and it was completely unprecedented, and it happened instantly. I know my physical activity increased by, tenfold. Just the walking for the Pokemon Go, and I still play it, but I probably play it 90% less than I did at the peak. But that whole thing, who would have believed that you could have gotten so many millions of people around the world doing something physical out in the world that they didn't do the day before? It's just, you've just got to give them the motivation. And bizarrely enough, the motivation for this radical change in behavior was a silly game where they used their mobile to simulate catching Pokemon. Who knew that would enthrall millions of people? Because, I freely admit, the gameplay of it was rubbish, had a lot of shortcomings. Like I said, I really don't like the people who were psychotically aggressive about what they didn't like, but there's heaps of things you could pick on. The gym battles were stupid. The GPS wasn't working very well, still doesn't work very well. The one, if I could single out one thing that I find really stupid, and I can't understand why they did this and they still haven't fixed it, because it would be so trivial to fix, that you get the same reward for catching a 10 combat point Pidgey as you do for catching a 2000 combat point Gyarados. How does that make any sense at all? That's the one that blew my mind. Even if they just did arbitrary tiers of Pokemon, it would have been really easy to put an algorithm in to match the difficulty of the catch to the reward, but they didn't. And that's the one that does my head in. It doesn't make me angry. The one that makes me angry is the GPS not working. If you ever want to get me in a public place swearing my head off, it's when I'm attacking a gym and the GPS just decides I've walked half a block away when I haven't moved, and it just errors out after all the work of trying to take a gym. That makes me really stabby. Still hasn't made me ever go online and make threats against the makers of the games, but at that point, it makes me borderline psychotically angry. And it would there could be a fix to that, but it just, that makes me crazy. But yeah, it's not as stupid to me as the no differentiation between Pokemon. That doesn't make any sense at all. And when you look at how big an impact Pokemon Go had, when it was basically pretty goddamn ordinary in terms of gameplay, it's just the mental real estate that Pokemon had and has had for decades. People latched onto that. Yeah, every now and then people latch onto something and you can't quite work out why. You know, whether it's, Coney 2012 or Pokemon Go. Everyone latches onto it at the same time. And it's like, oh, wow, I wonder if I could ever do that. And this is the one thing that, particularly when Pokemon Go was at its peak, I read all these smug and obnoxious articles online about people saying, this is why Pokemon Go is shit. This is why you should delete Pokemon Go. And they'd go on and they'd say why this element of gameplay was rubbish, or that was bad, or this was bad. And it's not so much that they said things that were incorrect, although they actually frequently did. But I always wanted to get these people who smugly goes, oh, this is why it doesn't make sense that Pokemon Go is successful. Go, okay, fine. You will never make anything that is 1/100th as successful as Pokemon Go. Go to sleep remembering that. You've done your smug hot take on why Pokemon Go's terrible, and I can confidently say pretty much no matter who you are in the entire world, you will never make anything that is 1/100th as successful, engages 1/100th as many people, makes 100th as much money. You just won't, because it was incredibly bizarre, weirdly successful phenomena. That doesn't mean you can't criticize it. It's just I really hate smugness. And with the people who made these really smug hot takes on it, I just really wanted to give them the slap up the head dose of reality of, and what have you done that anyone gives a crap about? There's nothing. So, yeah, I'm certainly not a huge defender of Pokemon Go. As I said, there's a couple of things about it that drive me crazy. I do still play it. I'm one of that minority who still play it, but they're about to bring out the second generation and everyone will play it again. Then everyone will be back out on the street trying to catch the next generation of Pokemon. For me, it's just a fascinating case study of how it is possible to reach an astonishing number of people and not just get them to play a game, because there are a lot of successful games, but to get such a large number of people to completely change their behavior, their physical behavior, and get them to go out in the world. That is the most amazing thing about Pokemon Go to my mind. And I'm sure there is some thoroughly evil purpose that could be put to, and I dread the day when that happens.